They thought this secret would never leave the family. For 10 years, no one spoke about it. Not on camera, not in interviews, not even behind closed doors. But inside one home, children were counting slices of bread, while just miles away, another pantry overflowed, and the money paying for both was coming from the same place. Today, that silence finally breaks, because one mother walked into a courtroom with receipts, memories, and a truth so heavy it would tear an entire family apart. The courtroom was filled wall to wall, yet no one dared move because the silence felt alive, pressing against every chest like a warning. The air heavy, the moment fragile, as if one sound might shatter everything. Cameras stood frozen, red lights blinking softly, producers sat stiff, pens hovering above paper, afraid to write the wrong thing. Members of the family avoided each other's eyes, some staring straight ahead, others studying the floor as though escape might appear there. And then, slowly, Christine Brown stood, her chair sliding back far louder than it should have been, the sound echoing through the room, drawing every gaze toward her. She smoothed the front of her blouse, not out of vanity, but as if preparing herself for battle. Her face calm, almost peaceful, but her hands shook slightly. Not from fear, but from emotion buried for years, waiting for permission to exist. She took one breath, then another, and when she spoke, her voice was soft, measured, respectful. Your Honor, for more than 10 years, I contributed money every month into what I believed was a shared family grocery fund, a system created so every household would be supported and every child would be cared for. She paused, swallowing hard, because saying it aloud felt heavier than carrying it silently for so long. I believed in that system. I trusted it. I taught my children that sharing was our strength, that together we were more than individuals, that none of us would ever be left behind. She lifted her eyes toward the jury, then lowered them again, because belief is painful once it has been broken. And when she continued, her voice deepened, not louder, but steadier. I was told the money would be used equally for all wives and all children. I was told fairness was the foundation of our family, and I believed that completely. The courtroom seemed to lean toward her, drawn by the calm intensity of her words. She described sending money month after month, trusting that what she gave would return in food on her table, trusting that someone else was honoring the promise she was keeping. She explained how she never questioned the process at first because love meant trust, and questioning felt like disloyalty. She said she assumed delays were mistakes, shortages were timing issues, and excuses were temporary. But over time, temporary became permanent, and questions turned into quiet dread. She recalled opening the refrigerator late at night, counting items, doing mental math, wondering how far meals could stretch, wondering why the numbers never made sense when she knew what she had given. And when her voice trembled, it was not weakness, it was memory. Years of pretending everything was fine while carrying the weight alone. She said there were nights she lay awake, not hungry, but worried. Worried about breakfast, worried about school lunches, worried about explaining to children why dinner looked smaller again. She admitted she blamed herself first. Every mother does, she thought. She wasn't budgeting well enough, cooking well enough, sacrificing enough, because when a system fails, the one who believes in it longest often assumes the fault is her own. The courtroom remained silent, even the judge unmoving as she continued. And then one day, she said softly, something changed. I realized the problem was not my effort, it was the imbalance. I realized the food was going somewhere else and not coming back to my home. That realization, she said, was not anger at first, it was confusion, disbelief, because she never imagined fairness could be selective. She described calling politely, asking gently, apologizing before even making the request, explaining she had already contributed, and asking if a portion of the order could be redirected to her house. And she remembered the response clearly. Orders already placed, maybe next time, maybe next cycle, maybe soon. And at first, she accepted that, because patience had always been her role, but next time never arrived. Cycle after cycle passed, month after month went by, and still the cupboards told a different story. She said that was when she began keeping records, not out of bitterness, but necessity, because when survival enters the picture, trust alone is no longer enough. She began writing dates, saving screenshots, tracking payments, because she needed clarity, if only for her own sanity. She needed to know whether she was imagining the imbalance or living it. And what those records revealed, she said quietly, changed everything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, folded paper, edges soft from years of handling, and held it up. This, she said, is the agreement we all signed, a promise we made to each other to feed every child equally, to share resources without favoritism, and to protect the family as a whole. And as the paper unfolded, the room felt tighter because promises look different once they are broken. She said, I lived by this agreement. Every month, every transfer, every sacrifice. I honored it fully, and I taught my children to believe in it too. But over time, I learned sharing only went one direction. The words hung heavy as murmurs rippled across the benches. On the defense side, a woman clenched a tissue, while a man behind her stared forward, jaw tight, refusing to react. And Christine did not look at them. She didn't need to. She spoke instead to the truth. She said there were evenings when her children asked why they could not have the same foods they saw elsewhere, and she explained gently that families were different, that comparison wasn't kind, that gratitude mattered. But inside, she knew something was wrong. She said her children believed scarcity was normal, believing less was simply how life worked, when in reality, less was chosen for them by someone else. The judge watched carefully, allowing her to continue, understanding this was more than testimony. This was release. She described one night in particular when only a few items remained and she made a call, not in anger, not accusation, simply asking for help. She had already paid, she had already waited, and she was told once again that the order could not be changed because others had preferences, because others needed more, because others mattered more. Even if the words were never spoken that way, she felt them all the same. And that was the moment she knew silence was no longer protecting anyone, it was enabling harm. And from that moment forward, she said, she stopped assuming fairness and started documenting reality. And when she placed the binders on the stand, the weight echoed louder than any outburst ever could. Years of deposits, months of transfers, grocery orders, delivery addresses, spreadsheets telling a story that emotions could not distort. And as the screen behind her lit up, displaying numbers, the courtroom shifted. People leaned forward, eyes widening as patterns became impossible to deny, contributions flowing consistently out, deliveries flowing almost exclusively elsewhere. And Christine simply said, "The arithmetic never worked. My bank account emptied, but my refrigerator did not fill." And the longer the data appeared, the harder it became to look away. Because this was not one mistake, not one misdelivery, not one misunderstanding. It was repetition, consistency, routine. And the room understood that routine is never accidental when it lasts years. She confirmed the photographs displayed were real, taken the same day, funded by the same pool of money. 2 households, 2 outcomes, abundance in one, absence in another. And she did not accuse, she did not shout, she did not cry. She simply stated the difference and allowed the truth to speak for itself. Even the soft hum of the projector felt loud now, and when someone whispered in disbelief, the judge did not silence them, because disbelief was natural. The story unfolding was not easy to accept. And when the defense attempted to explain needs, schedules, stress, Christine listened quietly, and then said something that shifted everything. She said, "I had needs too, and I had children too. And for years, I had no one sitting at my table every night, while someone else had both support and supply." She said her children learned early how to make food last, how to wait, how to accept less without complaint, because they believed that was love. And she said that belief hurt her more than hunger ever could, because children should not learn gratitude for neglect. The courtroom felt heavy with understanding as she finished, and when she finally sat down, exhaling deeply, It felt as though she had been underwater for years and had just reached air again. And even before the next witness was called, everyone knew something irreversible had already happened. The courtroom had not yet recovered from the weight of Christine's testimony when the judge called the next witness, and the room shifted again as a young woman rose from the gallery, her steps steady, her expression serious, not rehearsed, not emotional, simply resolved. And as she walked toward the stand, Christine lifted her eyes just briefly, pride and pain mixing together, before looking down again, because this was not easy for a mother to watch. And when Gwen Brown was sworn in, her voice was calm, clear, and unwavering. She stated her name and relationship, and when asked where she had lived growing up, she answered without hesitation, "In my mother's house, most of my life." And the attorney asked gently, "Did you ever notice anything unusual about the groceries in your home?" And Gwen let out a quiet breath, not a laugh, but a release. "Yeah, we didn't really have many." And the room reacted softly, not amusement, but shock, because honesty sometimes lands unexpectedly. She explained that as kids, they assumed this was normal, that families struggled, that money was tight, and that everyone was doing their best. She said dinner often meant stretching meals, rice, toast, frozen vegetables, sometimes peanut butter and bread, and while there was always love, there was rarely abundance. She explained she never complained because her mother worked hard and she believed scarcity was just part of life, until she began spending time in another house and saw something different. She described walking into kitchens filled with snacks, drinks, fresh fruit, full pantries, freezers stocked to capacity, and brand name foods they never bought. And she said it wasn't jealousy at first, it was confusion, because she thought the money came from the same place. And when asked if she knew her mother was contributing to the same grocery fund, she nodded and explained she had seen the transfers labeled grocery share, hundreds of dollars at a time, and yet none of it came back home. She said that realization felt like betrayal, not because someone had more, but because they had taken from everyone and given back to only themselves. She described babysitting and being told snacks were not for her, that certain foods were reserved, and the courtroom tensed as she spoke, not because of anger, but because boundaries around food are powerful symbols of belonging and exclusion. She said the hardest part was watching her mother pretend everything was fine, apologizing to them for things she did not cause, asking them to be patient, protecting peace at her own expense. And when asked if she ever confronted anyone directly, she said yes, once when she was younger, asking why there was always so much food there and so little at home. And she was told it was just how things worked and to stop making it uncomfortable. And at that moment, the courtroom felt something shift, because silence was no longer just passive, it had been enforced. She described a holiday season where grocery orders were massive, 2 turkeys, hams, pies, drinks, everything, yet nothing arrived at her mother's house, even though her mother had contributed. And when asked what they ate that year, she said quietly, "Deli meat and sides." And no one interrupted because there was nothing to challenge. She looked toward the jury and said, "We didn't feel angry, we felt invisible." And that word landed heavier than any accusation, because invisibility is what lingers longest. She said she didn't come to court to attack anyone, she came because telling the truth mattered, because pretending everything was fine had not protected anyone. And when she stepped down, the courtroom remained still, not in shock, but in recognition, because this was no longer a financial story, it was a human one. And as court resumed, the attorney revealed the final piece, a written agreement signed years earlier, and when it appeared on screen, the silence deepened, because promises written down were moved out, and the clause stating all children equal regardless of household was impossible to misinterpret. And when video footage played showing assurances given on camera years earlier, the contrast between words and outcomes became undeniable. And when asked to explain the discrepancy, the response was uncertainty, stress, confusion, but none of it accounted for a decade-long pattern, and the judge listened carefully, leaning forward, understanding that intent could not erase impact. And when calendars appeared highlighting months, years, deposits, deliveries, the imbalance was visible, even to those unfamiliar with numbers. And Christine sat quietly, watching truth unfold, not with satisfaction, but with exhaustion. Because being proven right after suffering is not joy, it is closure. And when arguments concluded, the room felt drained, as if everyone carried a piece of the weight now. And as the jury left to deliberate, the courtroom breathed again, whispers returning, movement resuming, but nothing felt the same because something had been acknowledged publicly that could never be undone. And when the jury returned, their faces serious, their steps measured, the gravity of decision hung thick. And as the verdict was read in favor of Christine, the reaction was not celebration, but relief, because fairness had finally been spoken aloud. And Christine closed her eyes, breathing deeply, not smiling, not crying, simply releasing something she had carried too long. And the judge spoke of accountability, responsibility, and recognition of harm. And those words mattered more than numbers, because harm, once named, loses its power to hide. And as proceedings ended and cameras rushed, Christine stepped outside into the light, surrounded by her children, standing tall, speaking calmly, explaining she did not seek to hurt anyone, only to protect her family and tell the truth. And her words traveled far beyond the courthouse, reaching people who had lived similar silence, who had given more than they received, who had been told patience was virtue, even when patience became pain. And when she later shared a simple image of her family around a table filled with laughter, it symbolized not victory, but restoration. And as conversations spread online, the story transformed from scandal into reflection about fairness, labor, and voice. And in that way, the courtroom did not end the story, it began something larger, something many recognized themselves within. In the end, the truth could no longer stay hidden. Christine didn't fight for revenge, she fought for fairness, for her children, for her voice, and for the years she stayed silent. The courtroom didn't just deliver a verdict, it delivered clarity. Some chose excuses, others chose silence,